Hey, do you teach yoga? Have you ever trained to lead yoga classes, to be a yoga therapist? Have you ever owned a yoga studio? Maybe even just wondered what it was like for the women and men up there in front of the room on their mats, leading you through endless Surya Namaskars, down dogs, and pranayamas galore? Well, these are their stories, and mine. I'm Rebecca Sebastian, a 20-year yoga teacher, 10-year yoga therapist, yoga studio owner, and co-founder of a yoga-focused nonprofit. I've done a lot in the yoga world over the last 20 years. Pretty much everything except had a water cooler. You know, a place to share stories, talk about struggles, successes, and find other people who do the same thing that I do. Welcome to Working in Yoga, a podcast and substitute water cooler for yoga folks to connect and build community, to share our unique profession, our challenges, and our journeys with the world.
Hey friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. Up next in my travel series, I have my friend Amy Zellmer on the podcast. Amy is the owner of Midwest Yoga Plus Life magazine, and Amy and I chat all about the side of travel and tourism in the yoga world that is conferences. Amy runs several conferences in association with the magazine, including the Midwest Yoga Festival, Iowa edition, that I get the opportunity to assist her with organizing. Now, she and I talk about one of the questions that I get so often on the podcast when we talk about things like conferences and festivals, which is what are people looking for in teachers or presenters when they run a festival? What kind of pitch are they looking for? What sort of content? She is generous enough to answer those questions and the same questions in regards to contributions to her magazine, which I just love. So if you're interested in teaching at conferences or festivals or writing for magazines, make sure you give this whole episode a listen because she answers some key questions and her number one answer might not be one that you think. Now, before we begin, would you please do me a solid and follow, like, or subscribe from wherever you're listening to the podcast? That helps other yoga folks find the podcast and listen along with us. Now, those new folks might be looking for a community or for interesting information on how we work, just like you were when you first started listening. So consider this like feeding the stray cats of the algorithm so that they come back to see us again and again. Also, thank you as always to Sunlight Apothecary for sponsoring the podcasts. Want to know how to serve the best tea at your yoga class? Find us at www.thesunlightexperience.com. Now, let's get into my chat with the one and only Amy Zellmer. Hey friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. Okay, this week on the podcast, I have my dear friend Amy Zellmer, and Amy and I are talking travel, events, retreats, and magazines. Amy, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Oh, well, I am Amy Zellmer. I am owner of Midwest Yoga and Life magazine, and I also own the Midwest Yoga Conference and the Yoga Teacher Conf, which I recently acquired from Allison Russell. And I guess I also authored a book, the Chair Yoga Pocket Guide. What else do you want to know about me? Because I could go on all day.
Girl, you do the stuff. You have your own podcasts. You've got all kinds of stuff going on. I love it. Okay, so today we're talking events, retreats, that kind of thing. And I really want to talk to you about that partially because you and I are coordinating a little bit together this year. And also, I am like a sucker for an event. Like, I'm just a serial event. Like, I want to throw parties is what I'm telling you, Amy. like what got you into events? What do you love about it? What are you excited about for this year?
Well, so last year I did my first Minnesota yoga conference, and that was sort of done sort of out of necessity in a way with the magazine in conjunction with, at the time I was still Minnesota Yoga and Life magazine, before I rebranded it. And I kind of did it out of necessity because the magazine just wasn't quite getting the traction I had hoped. And I was like, hey, putting together a conference would be a great way to bring in more income to support the magazine. Plus, just continuing, like, the mission of the magazine is to grow community and bring us together. And so adding a conference to that is just continuing that same mission, and potentially, just continuing to grow that community. So it kind of was born out of a need. And there used to be a Minneapolis Yoga Expo or something to that
Yep.
effect,
Yep.
but that went away, I guess, pre-COVID. I wasn't ever involved in that. And so there was a need, like there was a hole where this thing used to be. So I filled that hole.
I think people don't realize how fun and enjoyable it is to get together as a community.
Yeah.
Like, you and I have done Driftless Yoga Festival together, and you came to my conference in 2022. Like, I think we forget how much fun it is just to like play and hang out with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for many years, I was a photographer. I had a studio for many years. Um, and the Professional Photographer Association put on an annual conference, and it kind of moved around in the southern states every year. And it was like your big reunion, like all your photographer friends would get together once a year. And there was literally thousands of us at that conference, but it was so much fun. And like that's kind of what I want to recreate in the yoga world, where you just get together with your yoga friends from all over, and it's like an excuse to have to maybe travel if it's not in your area. So I think it's just so fun to go to events.
Let's talk Midwest, because I've been in the yoga space forever, way too long. Nothing ever happens here. So like I am so excited. You've got like retreats going on, you've got conferences going on. Girl, we are going to put something together in Iowa. We're going
Mm-hmm.
to. There's another one coming to Iowa. Like let's talk about our Midwest community. Have you seen, like you said, there was the Minnesota, what was it, Minneapolis yoga?
Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now we have something built for the Midwest. Like, what do you think's unique about us that you're excited to like get Midwesterners together? Besides we're rugged and have sour senses of humor.
Well, the Midwest nice, right?
You're right.
um, I just think we're an underserved community as a whole, like the whole Midwest, which is 12 states. Like it's not small.
Yes. Yes.
But people think that we're this like always freezing cold flat part of the earth. And it's
Yes.
just like, oh, that's fine. You don't have to come here and experience our beauty. We'll keep it to ourselves. Um, but I just feel like the Midwest is just so underserved, especially in the yoga world. Like you think of yoga on the coast, and nobody ever
Yes.
thinks of the Midwest like top of mind for yoga. When in reality, there's so many of us here. And so
Yes.
I just, I just felt it was time to rebrand the magazine, from a singular state to the Midwest, because I feel like our region just has so much to offer, just in so many things, not just yoga, right? Because it's yoga and life.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and bringing conferences. So I'm starting small, but I want you to know I'm thinking big. So I already started the Minnesota one, and so I'm going to continue that every year in April. But I'm hoping to do an Iowa conference coming up in October, or this fall, I should say.
Woo.
Um, and then every fall, like moving to another state, maybe, maybe
Yeah.
Illinois, Michigan. Like I was just talking to someone from Michigan. She's like, there's nothing up here, like nothing for
Yes.
yoga conferences. And maybe then each state will start to build roots and grow itself. but I just would love to see a conference. I feel like each state could sustain its own conference every year. I
Yeah.
mean, um, or at a minimum of every other year, right? Like, I just look at Minnesota, there's so many studios throughout the state and so many amazing teachers. Like, I'm not even bringing, well, this year I do have a few out of state speakers, but like, I don't even have to bring people from out of state, like there's so much right within our own state. And I feel the same way about Iowa, Michigan, um, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska. Well, maybe not quite as much Nebraska. They're a little smaller, but I just see so much potential.
Yeah. I love that you said that we're an underserved population because in the yoga world, we really are. I remember, gosh, it has to have been the first sitar, the International Association of Yoga Therapists conference that I went to in California. And I was like, why are you guys never in the center? Like, why are we
Nope.
always on the side?
Right?
And you know what somebody said to me? They were like, well, we went to Austin one year. I was like, okay, so then you're at the bottom
Texas.
now. You're
Right,
at the
right.
bottom of the bottom. Like, there are people in the center. And so, like, I love that you said that because I do think there's so much great yoga going on here. And people think New York, people think Florida, people think California, and maybe Denver as well for yoga. But we have stuff going on here.
And festivals too. I
Yeah.
see most of the festivals more on the coasts, right?
Yes.
Um, Driftless was in Iowa, and
Yep.
then River Valley Yoga Festivals here in Minnesota. And she's growing roots, so that's exciting to watch. But yeah, your festivals tend to be on the coasts as well.
It's true. So tell me this. Now, this year, you've got a conference in April. Tell us the dates. Tell us what's happening.
So it's April 20th and 21st. It's in Eagan, Minnesota, which is very near the airport. If anyone were to happen to fly in, most hotels have shuttle service. Um, and we have three tracks going on. We have a business builder track, a health and wellness track, yoga movement track. I think we have like 36 speakers over 2 days. So pretty
Nice.
excited. I last year I thought our lineup was awesome, but this year it's just like even more awesome. So it's exciting to see it expand.
Are you seeing people hungry for this sort of event, like in a way that maybe we've all been missing it for the last few years?
Yeah, and it's really interesting. So COVID, I feel a lot of studios lost their way in COVID. A lot of studios had to close, but a
Yes.
lot of new teachers sprouted up because what did they do with their time? They took teacher training.
Yes.
So I see a lot of new teachers very hungry for information and new studios just starting to slowly start it up. Um, so yes, I think people are very hungry, and I think the studios that did survive, right, and they're excited to get involved and um, yeah, I do. I think I know your conference was it 22
22, March
March.
20. We were the first conference out from COVID. I don't know if our timing was great, but we needed to do it at the time. Yeah.
But you know what? I was so excited to go to yours because it was like the first conference post COVID. And um, I know your attendance wasn't what you had hoped it would be, but
Sure.
and even last year, so that would have been April of 23, I felt my attendance wasn't what it could be either.
Yeah.
Um, and I just, events are a little bit events in general, like not even just in the yoga world. I'm hearing it across the board that conferences have been a little harder to fill up because, you know, people are just particularly a year ago, people were still a little hesitant,
Yes.
right? Where
Yes.
now I feel like we've kind of gotten over that hump, I think, that the COVID hump.
Yeah.
I think people are more comfortable going out and absolutely if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. Cool. Um, totally welcome. Um, but I think we're past that big hump.
Yeah.
of people being scared to go gather. Um, I'm hoping we're over that hump now.
I'm feeling the energy for sure. Now, we're
Yeah.
recording this here in early February, and I'm going to admit that this is the time of year, just in general, where it's easy for us to make money. Like, I'm like skipping through January with all my business owner friends who have other businesses that did great in December. And I was like, we were ghost town in December, but I love January. We can make so much money. But like, I am feeling like the energy of people who are wanting to do conferences and come back into big classes. And it used to be like, for example, I taught a class just last night that was booked full. We were booked solid. And it used to be, even in 2023, I would have people checking that attendance. And if I was booked out, they would cancel because they didn't want to be in that
Mm,
room with, you know, because we're not quite mat to mat. I don't think we'll ever be mat to mat again as an industry. Most of us aren't going to do that. But we are close. We are pretty tight. And
hmm.
I didn't have anybody do that. Everybody showed up. We were packed in there, and it was a great experience. And I'm excited. I think events are going to be like on the roll this year.
Yeah. And I did my first retreat last fall, in October, and we had 50-ish people, and like we put everybody pretty close. I mean, we weren't mat to mat, but darn close, just to
Yeah,
fit everyone in the space. And I had a few people had masks on, and that's fine. But nobody had any problems with it, with being that close. And as far as I know, nobody got sick, right?
yeah.
I had one person cancel because she knew she had COVID. And that's
We
what
love
we
her for
want.
that.
We
Yes,
want you to
yes,
not come if you have COVID. But that should just be the standard. Like, if you're sick, just stay home.
yes.
Um, but
I also think that there's a little bit more money floating around, like culturally, than there was last year.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
real tight last year. I mean, I felt
yep.
the immediate drop from June to December, and already I think people are feeling a little bit more confident in spending on these extra things. Are you feeling that too?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of uncertainty still a
Yeah,
year ago. Like,
yeah,
are we out of this or aren't we out of this? Because,
yeah,
there was always like rumors that there was going to be another shutdown. And it's like, who are spreading these rumors? Like, this is stupid. Um, and I think we're past all that kind of junk.
yeah.
I do think there's a little more discretionary income out there. People can spend a little more on themselves. Um, I hear from a lot of studios, they're still not back to where they used to be. Um, and I it's like, how can we continue to support these studios and get the message out there to get people back into the studios?
Yeah. I do think one of the messages that, and I had a guest on here, Nick Daniel, who was on last year, and Nick said one of the things that she didn't realize we needed to push in messaging was to stop feeling guilty about not coming back yet. Because a lot of people, it's almost easier to start fresh than it is to sort of do that walk of shame into a yoga studio you haven't been in for 3 years or 3.5 years. And like the more we can be welcoming and just say, hey, welcome back. We're so glad
Yeah,
you're here. Way to make it. High
yeah.
five. We're all here. Let's go.
It's interesting. I had gone to the North Dakota conference. I think it was fall of two. Um, and one of the studios was mentioning how like if you were an annual member, you could leave your mat and props and stuff at the studio. And she was purging because she was actually moving. And so she messaged all her students and was like, you need to come pick up your stuff, because most people hadn't come back from COVID yet. And she's like, if you don't pick it up, it is getting donated. And she said, not a single person came to pick it up.
Wow. Oh my
So
God.
that's interesting what you're saying about this feeling of shame and the walk of shame. Like,
Yes.
did these people just not, like, what was it? Well, there was some sort of psychological barrier there to go pick up. And she's like, some of these are like $200 mats. She's like, I just can't believe they're not coming to pick them up.
I still see that even today. So, like, when I'm interacting with people who are new to the studio, and we have like a clear sort of cycle of how people get into our space, and people will apologize. So, oftentimes people come in and I'll say, hey, come try class, a week of classes on us. And it's a great way to get people sort of in our system and getting to know us, and it's converts really well. And people will text me and be like, I'm so sorry I can't come today. Like in January when it's icing out, and they're like, I'm so sorry, I'm not so flaky. And I'm like, we have never, first of all, we have never met. Second of all, who hurt you? Because it's okay for you to, like, I'm not here to make you feel bad
Right.
about this. Like, just come. We all want to feel better. That's what these conferences are about. Like,
Hmm.
come, we want to feel better and we want to hang out together.
And I think, I mean, we could get off on a different tangent. I know that's not where we're going, but like, I do think people have been hurt and shamed in yoga studios in the past.
Yes,
And
yes.
that's trauma that they carry forward.
I think they have had those experiences in events too, in
Yeah,
your like conferences, in your festivals where, it's very ableist and all those things, and people come in and they're like, I don't feel comfortable here.
right.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I'm trying to change that narrative within the conference too of everybody's welcome, no matter your skill level, your ability. Um, and we had a gal in a wheelchair last year, which made me so happy. And she's coming back this year. But that made me so
Yeah.
happy, like, yeah,
Did I ever tell you, so my goal for my studio is to move to a space where I can have garage doors that open so people in wheelchairs can come in and we can have like truly accessible classes. Like not even just kind of accessible, but like wildly accessible classes.
yeah,
Like that's the goal, is for us to just gather back together with open arms and get everybody here, which again I think is like that conference feeling that you're trying to create here, with all of us being able to come in, and it's fun to spend the day doing yoga and
hmm
meeting new people.
hmm absolutely. And I do think, I think there is some hesitation about going to a conference, especially like maybe a new teacher or someone just new to yoga. Like, oh gosh, I don't know enough to go to a conference. And that's really where I'm trying to push the message of like, you don't need to know anything. There's three tracks. There's a lecture track, that you're not even doing any yoga in. You're just listening, like maybe about Ayurveda or how to build your business or, learning about the chakras. Like there's really cool stuff. There's not just physical asana. Um, so really trying to get that message out there too.
Okay, so for yoga pros who are listening, let's talk about what it is, what it takes to do an event like this, because you've done some, I've done one. Like there is a particular mindset that you have to think about when you're like wanting to build events. So let's start talking a little bit about that. Like, how do you start thinking about events? Do you do themes? Do you have a marketing strategy before you begin? Like, what is your creative process?
Well, mine have had themes just because they kind of go with the magazine or whatever theme that issue is.
Yeah.
So I don't think you have to have a theme. Um, like if you're getting stuck with that, like don't let that get you stuck. Doing a big event like a conference is not for the faint of heart. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of moving pieces. Some of the biggest compliments I got last year were like, wow, this is really well organized. Like, wow, you're
Yeah.
very organized. That's always a huge compliment. And I'm always like, oh, thanks. Aren't most conferences? And people are like, oh no, I've been to conferences that were not. Um, which makes me sad. But yeah, so it's a lot of moving parts. Like, you gotta do your call for speakers, right? You gotta figure out who are gonna be your speakers. You gotta put a schedule together. For me, that was the hardest part, learning how to make a schedule. Because it's not just a straight, 1 to 2, 2 to 3. Like you got breaks in there, you got vendors that you need to make sure people go see. You have to have
Yes.
enough time for people to go meet with your vendors. Because vendors also help keep the ticket costs down, right? Um, and you got to do a call for vendors too, I guess.
Yeah.
um, I literally got out what's that paper called? Graph paper
Oh
that
yeah.
has boxes.
Yep.
Because I couldn't like visualize the space. Like, how am I gonna lay everybody out? So I
Same.
literally got a graph paper and like each square was like 10 square feet or something, and I like literally like drew out the conference center and then the space where the vendors will be so that I knew who I could put where. Because you got to make sure that everybody's going to fit, you
Yeah.
know. You don't want to have too small of a space. Like, you're better off having too big of a space, right? You want more room than
Yes.
not enough
Yes.
room. And like right now I'm trying to find a venue, and I just kind of put it out on Facebook for people to help me. And they're sending me these lovely venues, but we seat 100 seated. Well, that's like
Eh,
50 on a mat.
yep.
Like, it doesn't equate the same way,
Yeah.
right? Like, you have yoga mats involved. So just knowing that, like, it's about 1,000 square feet for 50 people, if I remember right, on yoga mats. Um, yeah, what else? What am I missing?
So I think you like the visualizing the event and the flow of how an event goes, like you said, I think is the number one thing. Like I always tell people to build a picture in their mind of what it looks like and then build a picture of who's there because sometimes we have this idea of like, oh, anybody with legs can come. But that's not necessarily true. Like, you have to know who you're talking to and what kind of people you want to come to your conference so you know to like get teachers that match those people.
Mhm.
Do you do that? That's always my strategy. Is like I'm thinking about who I want to come.
Yeah, and I mean, like I've said, I truly want it to have a mix of total beginners all the way through experienced teachers, right? Teacher trainers. Um, and so it's important when picking my speakers and deciding on my
Yes.
tracks.
Yes.
Like, that's why I put that business builder track in, was because I feel like the thing I see missing in the yoga world, and when I was a photographer, it was the same thing, is like business skills, you know?
Yep. Why,
and
yes, I do. I have a whole
and
podcast about it, friend.
and I know I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
Oh, that's why I wanted the business track, because like I'm meeting with these businesses and like they have no sense of how to run a business. And it was the same thing in the photographer. Like, they're like identical. Like, any like self-employed field is the same.
Yes. Yes.
People get into it to be self-employed because we're creatives, but we don't have that business savvy sense of how to market our business and make money. And so that's why that business builder track was really important to me. The health and wellness track, because I feel, um, people get into yoga, but then don't know about all the other things, right? Chakras, Ayurveda,
Yeah.
whatever. And
Yeah.
it's not everybody's cup of tea, and that's cool. That's why we've got like yoga, and then we've got the workshops, and
Yeah.
I really wanted it to like cover everybody. Where like Allison's vision for the yoga teacher comp it was just for yoga teachers
Yeah.
mainly. Um, and that's not 100% the way I want to go with it. Like, I definitely want there to be stuff for those teachers, but I also want there to be stuff for the brand new teacher or the person that's new to yoga in general.
So here's my question to you. And I asked Allison this question a long time ago on the podcast, but let's talk what you're looking for presenters because I think
Mm,
that is as I start to mentor yoga teachers and they go, how do I do what you do? As I'm going, oh my God, I'm going to travel again this summer and I've got workshops and things that I'm presenting. People are like, how do I get there? What are you looking for in a presenter or a teacher who's going to teach at your conferences or events?
mhm. can I start with a few what I'm not looking for? Um,
Totally. Let's do don'ts
so
and do's.
yeah, so when you're filling out your teacher application, fill it all out. Don't don't
That
leave
can't be
stuff
your first
blank.
one.
I
What?
mean, like hi, like basic 101. Um, your bio should be complete. Like it shouldn't just be two sentences. Same with your class description, unless it says specifically like, in 1 to 2 sentences.
Yeah.
Um, like have a complete class description. Like I need to know what the heck this class is about. The title may or may not tell me. Um, and then like in my application, I also ask like where else have you spoken at or presented? And it's okay if you haven't been anywhere else, right? Um, but if you have, definitely put that in there. Um, but I see a lot of applications come through and they just aren't complete. Like they put a 1 sentence answer for things, and that tells me that they didn't put thought and effort into their application. And
There it
at the
is.
beginning of the application, so I literally took Allison's application
Yeah.
and adapted it.
Yeah.
And it says, this is a lengthy application. Grab a cup of tea and settle in, right? Like, do this when you have time to sit down and do this. Um, so like we're warning you at the top. It's going to
Yeah.
take you a minute to fill this out. So if you're giving me 1 sentence answers for things that should be a paragraph or so, like that's going to be a hard pass, right? Um, I also put, I don't want to call them trick questions. They're not trick questions, but they're like coffee or tea, or what's your favorite color?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm looking to see how you answer that. Do you just put coffee, or do you put a latte breve with half foam with caramel, like, right? Like do you give
Yeah.
it a little more effort?
Yeah. Yeah.
um One of my favorite answers to what's your favorite color was like anything that reminds me of the sunrise, and I was like, I love that
Mm.
answer. um so I kind of put those little questions into my applications too, just to see how people respond. And like I had one person put, what kind of question is this? And I was like, nope, you're not my people.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that's something that what you're saying is important to emphasize. So I want to emphasize it again. If you're going to teach on a workshop circuit or a conference circuit or a festival circuit, we're looking for wildly creative people who are bringing something new to the table that you're not getting at a yoga studio. So sometimes I'll see yoga studio owners do their signature workshops and then apply with that signature workshop that they've had at their studio all the time in a conference setting. And I'm like, y'all need better, you need new content, be creative. Like,
Yeah,
absolutely, I agree with you.
let your personality show.
Yeah.
And same with your bio. Like I learned this many years ago. Like no matter how professional of a setting you're applying to, like maybe you're applying to speak at a corporate America place, right? But still put something personable. So like at the end of my bio, it's something like Amy is addicted to Starbucks and anything glittery or something like that. Like put just a little cutesy something in it that'll make people kind of chuckle or smile.
Yeah, I'm looking my bio up now. Okay, mine says if you want to get nerdy about yoga and wellness industry, chat about the best tea blends and deconstruct everything we thought we knew. Rebecca's your human. Yeah, you got to have something.
Yep.
Like have a
Yep.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're saying we want creative people. We want people who are, we're going to say detail oriented or thorough people.
Yeah.
And if you're
Can
not,
follow
yeah,
direction.
if you're not filling out the entire application, that also means that maybe you're not thinking about the experience that your students are having when they're coming to the conference. And like our job as conference facilitators is to have the most knockout presenters possible.
Yeah.
What else are you looking for? So creativity, detail orientedness.
Mm-hmm. I also put this year, so last year's conference, I'd say 90% of my teachers showed up to teach and left. And so this year,
Okay.
I mentioned it several times, and then I have a checkbox at the end where like they sign their name and everything. Like I agree to fully participate in at least one day of the conference. Like you need to be there.
Yeah.
You need to be a part of the community. People want to interact with you after your class. I get it. Like there are some extenuating circumstances. Like one of my teacher has it, she's doing teacher training that weekend. So I told her it's fine, just show up in the morning, teach the class. I get it. But like in general, I want you there and being part of the community and interacting with other people. Like this is networking too. It's not just
Yes.
education.
Yes.
So that's really important. And also, if they're asking you to help promote the event, you need to be helping to promote the event. Like I create graphics and I give them to you along with copy and paste text to
Yes.
put on social media or in an email. I make it as easy as I can for you to take 10 minutes to share this with your audience because that is how we see, right? And the conference is only successful if we get butts and seats.
Yes.
Um, and so it is just as much your job to try and get people there as it is my job. And so that's also really important when you're looking at a teacher application, if it's asking you to promote and it's asking you to be there for the day and you're saying yes I will, you need to follow through on that or
Yeah,
you will not be invited back.
right. I mean, that's really true. And I think people who haven't done the conferences or the festivals or even being submitted to a magazine, because you know this is the same way if you're
Yeah.
submitting an article to the magazine, and I've been lucky enough, you've been gracious enough to publish for me, and I've been published other places as well. And that's just part of the deal, is that once you're published or once you're working at a conference, like I've presented at the IOIT's conference before, and part of our contract is that we have to share X number of times and we have to put it on our
Mhm.
lists. And people don't maybe realize that that's part of the process, is that, you know, they've done you a favor because now your name has more gravitas than it did 20 seconds ago before you had the job, right? But your equal energy exchange is telling people where you're at so that your people can come see you.
Mhm. And I mean, some of the big festivals are pay to play. Uh,
Correct.
who have to pay to have a booth there or in some other way help fund whatever that festival is.
Yeah.
You know, where in my case, I'm paying my speakers to come. But I know that there are a lot of festivals and conferences that are a pay to play type
Yeah.
situation.
Even a pay to apply even to teach there.
Yes, yes, that's true.
Yes. So, I mean, and each conference runs it a little bit differently. And like I said, I've spoken at a couple. IOIT is probably the biggest one, and they actually don't pay you to speak at all.
A
Like,
lot don't.
and you don't get paid for your work, but what you do get, you get paid in gravitas of,
Yeah.
you get paid, they'll cover your hotel room and they'll give you a ticket to the event, right?
Mhm.
And so in that sort of situation, it's well worth my time to teach and then get a $400 ticket for free.
Right. That's exactly with mine. I do pay you, but I also give you a full access ticket. Mm.
Yeah, and I think that's just a great way for you also to be able to, like you said, network and things like that. I think we often forget that we're professionals. And one of the great things about these events is that you get to network with other people. I know you have Mandy King who's coming up to your conference in
Mhm.
April. And Mandy and I met at Driftless, and like we
Yep,
were
that's how
roomies.
I met her. Yep.
Yeah. Like that's somewhat how this happens for you, is if you're skillful at making friends.
Yep. Yep. She was the volunteer assigned to my class. So that was how I met Mandy, and I
Love
just
her.
absolutely adore her. And I was like, you must speak at my conference. Um,
What's not to love? Like, I just
I
was like, I
know.
gotta get Mandy on this podcast.
Yes, yes. And and like it's been really interesting. So like this will be my fifth magazine issue that comes out here in April. And I have a lot of recurring contributors, which is awesome. They
Awesome.
just love contributing, which makes my life easy. But each issue, I'm getting more and more people applying, or not applying, but submitting pitches, which is fantastic. And then this year for the conference, I had way more. I think I had double the applications this year. So
Nice.
it's so encouraging to see everything just keep growing. And I know, by expanding, like having this Iowa conference, like I know you're going to be able to help me bring that exposure into Iowa. And next on my list is Illinois. Um,
I'm on the
so I just,
border. I'll do both.
yay! And that's the thing. So many of the Midwest states, it's not that far. Like from me to Omaha, I think is like 6 hours.
Yep.
From Minneapolis to the UP is like 8. Like I mean, like it's not as far as people think. Like I can be to
Yeah.
Kansas City or St. Louis in like 9 hours.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so um,
So let's talk magazines. Since we're like, I actually love this track that we're going down of supporting how people can start doing this sort of work, like being contributors in festivals, conferences, and magazines. What are you looking for in a good magazine pitch? Which also reminds me, I want to pitch for your next magazine. But what are you looking for?
first and foremost, follow the instruction. I lay them all out for you, so please read them. So first and foremost, please follow the instruction. And when I say that, I'm looking for a pitch. I'm not looking for you to send me the whole article,
Yeah.
because I'm not going to read it at that point. So I put out a call for content. It's usually right around April 1st and October 1st for the following. And I have a theme. And so kind of pitch to the theme. It doesn't have to exactly match the theme, but in general, if it's relevant, pitch the theme. If it's relevant to the time of year, right? Like a lot of my Ayurveda writers for spring, summer, like they'll write to spring and summer, fall and
Yeah.
winter,
Yeah.
whatever. It doesn't have to be seasonal, but if it is, keep that in mind. And just compelling pitches, right? Like give me enough of a pitch. Like a pitch should at least be a few sentences. Like I'll have people just send me a singular sentence.
Stop
But
it.
I know. And so,
No.
sending at least a few sentences. I need to know the gist of what you want to write about. And in my case, I also say I give priority to articles that can supply images to accompany their article. And then I also make it very clear that we accept images from like Canva, Pixabay, Pexels, like any of those, Google. It has to be your image or like a professional photographer's image that you have permission to use. Because we print 5 to 6 thousand of this magazine, so
Yeah.
we do not meet the requirements of those free services like Pexels and Canva, like
Yeah.
right. And just because you've commissioned an image, like if you've purchased a stock photo from like you purchased that, you have the license. I don't have the license.
Yep.
And so I get it that people don't fully grasp all that, but when I tell you not to submit those images, please don't submit those images because it makes my life difficult. So just following directions is the theme today.
But I mean, again, if you want to grow and build content and build things like that's actually key. I mean, now that you're saying this, I'm a good direction follower. I think that part of why my yoga studio lasted this long is because I was good at following directions to get grants to keep my business open. Like,
Oh, and that's hard to do. That grant writing is its own world.
yeah, like, so this is so much easier than that. And like applying to your conference, like you said, you were like, oh, it's a grab a cup of tea, sit down. And I'm like, I've seen I've application, and if yours is like hers, it's not that long.
It's not that long.
It's not that
No,
long. I've
but
applied to longer.
and you do need on my application, I also will point out if you are teaching a yoga class, you do need to have your own insurance.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
have some people question that. And it's like everybody should have liability insurance. It's like
Yeah.
$200 a year through Biyogi. Like,
Yeah.
so if you're teaching a yoga class, you also have to have insurance. And one other thing about the pitches, this is
Yeah.
actually quite important. Meet the deadline.
Yes. Of
Yep,
course. Meet
deadlines are
the
there for a reason. Same with the application. The
Yeah.
applications have a deadline as well, and inevitably I'll get people a couple days after deadline. Oh, I missed the deadline. Can I still submit this? No. Because if you
Yeah.
can't meet the deadline to submit, what makes me think you're going to show up the day of or show up on
Yeah.
time?
Or
Like it's
submit
just
your article on time if you're pitching for the magazine.
exactly.
You've got to be able to do things in a timely manner. But again, like in my experience, the reward of keeping the discipline of doing something on time is much greater. Like, don't question this, y'all. Like, if you need to put a deadline on your calendar, I feel like we talked about this last time we had a Zoom call. Like, I just pad it for 48 hours ahead of time. So it's just like the
Yeah.
deadline's on my calendar 2 days before it actually is.
Yes. Yes.
So then I'm just going, okay, so I mean, I don't need to be like, nobody needs to be the A plus person. You can be. Amy would appreciate it if you were an A plus person that submitted your article like 12 days ahead of time.
I will give you gold stars.
Gold stars, you're a very good girl. But like, if you're not that person, like, give yourself 2 days.
If deadline is the 15th at noon and you turn it on the 15th at 11:59, you are on time. It's
Yes.
cool. If
Yes.
it's at 12:10, you are not. You are late.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry.
So I feel like some of the pitches too might be some of the similar things. Like we're detail oriented. You want creative pitches, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
are you looking for people to have a particular set of writing skills, or can you judge that?
we can judge that. And my editor and I just had a good conversation about this. Like, you can fix medical problems, but you can't fix someone's like creative writing style, if that makes sense. Their
Sure.
voice.
Yeah.
Um, so, definitely letting your voice show in your pitch. And make sure that that matches what you write. We can absolutely fix grammar, punctuation, all
Yeah.
that stuff. Like that's not a problem. Um, we don't expect you to be an English major. We're creatives here.
Right. I mean, and I'm thinking actually, I worked with Nina Zoltau, who does Yoga for Healthy Aging, that blog. And one of their editors there. And I was just amazed at, like she's doing the nitty gritty of editing and English language and all this stuff that I just don't have, but she just made me
No.
look better.
Yep.
So don't be afraid of editing. Don't be afraid of that. They make you look better. They make you look smarter. Love them.
Behind every great writer is an even better.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to wrap up. What kinds of things are you looking for your October pitches? So if your April 1st comes out for the magazine in October, I'm going to guess it's something similar for if you're looking for teachers for an October yoga festival in Iowa. What kinds of things are you looking for? What's the theme this year, Amy?
So it's going to be inclusion.
Woo!
So the call for content for the magazine right around April 1st. You do need to be on our list to be in the know of that. And then our call for speakers for the conference actually be going out pretty soon, very March. Because then I hope to have a schedule up by like April. So I'm all about getting that schedule out as possible because
Yeah.
there's been festivals that I've attended that don't have the schedule out till literally a few weeks before. And it's just stressful. Like I don't understand. So
Yeah,
I'm a planner.
especially for conferences, people want to know what they're signing up for.
Yeah. I know who's gonna be there. Yeah.
Okay, Amy, tell everybody how to find you and connect with
Mhm.
you.
Yep. So midwestyogalife.com is the best website in general. And then mnyogaconference.com is for the April conference. And then midwestyogaconference.com doesn't exist yet, but it will very soon once we get wheels going on the ground for that fall conference.
Woo! All right,
Yeah.
Amy, I love this conversation. You're great.
Yeah. Thank you. I always love chatting with you.
Thank you so much, Amy, for joining me on the podcast. Here are our key takeaways. First, the best part of event planning is that you get to hang out with other people who have the same job that you do. This is one of my favorite things about conferences and festivals, and really, it cannot be underestimated. We talked about that with Heather Cherie Sanders on the podcast talking about the Sedona Yoga Festival, and really, it's why so many of us love events like this. Next, themes are useful, especially if you're trying to curate a specific kind of experience for people. While having a theme is not required, of course, it really does help with decision making and making sure that everything that you choose is aligned with the experience you're creating for your guests. Next, if you are the organizer, visualize how the flow of the event is going to go and then reverse engineer how to get there. You need to know who your target audience is and how they're going to move in the space, what kinds of vendors you're going to have, and where those folks are going to be set up. It really helps to map out your entire event because things will run smoothly when you can see it all. Next, want to present at a conference? Here are our best tips. First, make sure that you completely fill out all of the forms and bring a little bit of yourself to the application. Details are important. Organizers are looking for creative folks who are bringing something different than what they would normally see in a yoga space or a yoga studio event. So keep that in mind when you're filling out the application. Next, put something personal in your bio because just like in those applications for conferences, it makes people feel like they know you a little bit better and it creates a more personal connection between you and your students or you and the people whose conference you're trying to present at. Next, being a participant in the event that you're teaching in also makes a big difference in the experience that you're going to have. If you're introverted like I am, I totally understand if you're flinching right now, but conferences are the time to interact and connect with other professionals like you. When you go home, make sure you have heavy blankets and a dark room ready, but until then, you're going to have fun chatting and participating all weekend long. I promise. And finally, pitching for magazines is similar to pitching for conferences. Follow the instructions, have a catchy pitch, and meet your deadlines. The thing is this, if you're easy to work with, you will have a huge advantage. And the event coordinators and editors are going to ask you to come back next time. And that's what we all want. Now, next week on the podcast, we talk with a team member from the Himalayan Institute about their experiences in their travel department with spiritual pilgrimages and travel and tourism excursions. I think you're going to really love all that they have to say. And I actually really learned a lot from even interviewing this episode, and I find how they run some of their operations to be super clever. There are some things that when you travel with folks, most people who aren't creating retreats or travel excursions don't consider, and I think that the Himalayan Institute has some great solutions for how to rise to the occasion. Now, as always, thank you for listening, friends. I am so grateful that you are here, and I will catch you around the water cooler next time.